The Atlantic, 1654. "Get the rope up!" the captain shouts. Next to him, a sailor frantically ties an unfamiliar knot, while a wave crashes over the side, washing freezing water over their ankles. "Haste, men! We must stop the gale before we go under!" Passengers huddle on the deck, a load of colonists bound for Jamestown, hoping to start a new life after the devastation of the English Civil Wars. The sailor throws the rope over a spar. Not a sailing knot, but a hangman's noose, that he then places around the throat of a drenched old woman shivering in the rain. "Catherine Grady!" the captain shouts over the thunder. "Thou stand condemned as a witch, guilty of colluding with Satan to stir up this tempest. For this, thou shalt hang from the neck until dead." Grady kicks as they haul her into the air, twisting in the winds that she does not and could never control, and winds that long after she swings limp will still howl on. Thanks so much to Trade Coffee for keeping us history-loving beans caffeinated. Catherine Grady would not be the last person executed in panics involving the strange weather of the Little Ice Age. On the contrary, the worst periods of witch hunting across Europe and in colonial America tended to happen after either unusual seasons, strange cold, early frosts or droughts, or extreme weather events. In fact, one of the biggest catalysts to the witch hunting movement came in 1519, when King James VI of Scotland, later James I of England, held a series of witchcraft trials after Atlantic storms appeared to be trying to sink his ship. After executing several supposedly magic assassins, he wrote the book Demonology, both defending and re-energizing the witch hunts across Europe. But weather also played a major part in these witch hunts when they began a century earlier, and that was due to another book, the Malleus Maleficarum, or Hammer of Witches. Published in 1487, it was a popular guidebook to hunting witches and did much to spread the practice. It also leaned heavily on the idea of witches manipulating weather, and as a result, thousands across Europe would be executed as scapegoats for the erratic climate conditions. Because while people didn't understand what was happening in scientific terms, they definitely knew that something had changed. Snow fell further down on mountains than even the very old could remember. Glaciers advanced, constant rains spoiled crops, and baking droughts killed livestock. Greenland became inaccessible due to ice. Unseasonable frosts would cause entire harvests of wine grapes to be unusable, and wine growing disappeared from more northern latitudes like England, whose vintages were beginning to rival that of France. Between 1693 and 1697, crop loss resulted in famines in Norway, Sweden, and France. In Central Europe, failed harvests due to environmental factors were a major part in the mass starvation of the 30 Years' War. And of course, there were the spectacularly powerful storms and weather events, which seemed to help nudge history at every turn. In 1588, for instance, the Spanish Armada that was supposed to restore Catholicism to England was defeated partially by battle and partially by a freak series of gales likely fueled by a new accumulation of ice off Greenland. More ships and men were lost by tempest than combat. Likewise, the Great Fire of London in 1666 might not have been quite as severe had a drought not dried out the largely wooden city. Lisbon, Portugal had 8 snowstorms in a single winter, and coastal flooding inundated the Low Countries, ruining some reclaimed land that had been built out into the sea. And of course, the French Revolution was spurred on by a series of extremely bad grain harvests that pumped bread prices into the stratosphere. But while Europeans were seeing their climate change, the European colonists in North America were experiencing a land and climate entirely new to them. They were shocked by the violent weather they experienced in the 1600s. This was, after all, quite literally a new world for them, containing new people, animals, plants, and climate systems. With no sense of historical weather patterns in the Americas, they at first assumed that these deep snows, frequent droughts, and constant Atlantic storms were normal for the area. This started early, when the first English colonists at the Jamestown colony arrived in 1607 amidst a horrifying drought, unable to grow enough food, and keeping them dependent on supply ships and trade with the native Powhatan Confederacy. But by 1609, a failed harvest, a lost supply ship, and a conflict with the Powhatan led to the Starving Time, when the harsh winters of 1609 and 1610 forced the Jamestown colonists to eat horses, dogs, cats, rats, seabirds, and in at least one confirmed instance, one of their own. Now, you might be wondering why, if this phenomenon was global, we're largely talking about Europe and North America. Well, there's a reason for that. See, there's a major debate about whether the Little Ice Age was truly a global phenomenon or whether it mostly influenced the North Atlantic region. There are certainly events that seem to fit the pattern, and science to back up that this was a result of cooling, but the evidence is not as solid or as dramatic as that in the North Atlantic region. During the period, glaciers advanced to their maximum modern extent in New Zealand. Also, both Aztec and Mayan chronicles speak of poor harvests. And supporting those documents is work charting the amount of maize pollen and charcoal in core samples, suggesting some areas of Mesoamerica showed a decrease in population and settlement. Recent work has also been done in charting the vast economic damage the inclement weather wreaked on the Ottoman Empire, which had a heavy dependence on agriculture. Indeed, it appears a major rebellion in 1596, the most severe internal crisis the Ottoman Empire faced in centuries, was directly tied to the government raising taxes at a time of unprecedented agricultural devastation. Similarly, in China, it had been proposed that the periods of cold winters and dry summers helped exacerbate the famines of the later Ming dynasty, opening the door for the Jurchen tribes of the later Jin dynasty under Nurhaci to overthrow them and found the Qing dynasty. Interestingly, Nurhaci's remains would later disappear until they showed up at a Shanghai nightclub in 1935 when an American archaeologist bartered them to a crime lord Lao She in exchange for a diamond called the Peacock's Eye, once owned by— Wait a minute, Rob. Is this just the beginning of Temple of Doom? Nice. Okay, scratch that. Nurhaci founding the Qing dynasty, yes, but remains disappearing and being part of an elaborate nightclub brawl, no. As in no more time for love, Dr. Wrath, because we gotta get back to the point, which is while the story of the Little Ice Age seems to be broadening, it is still generally centered around the North Atlantic, where people were beginning to gain an appreciation for the aesthetics of snow. Dutch Renaissance artist Peter Bruegel the Elder turned his brush to winter landscapes with his 1565 work, The Hunters in the Snow, the first of several paintings depicting snow-capped roofs, icicles, and town watercourses frozen solid. And other artists of the Dutch Golden Age took the same tack, filling landscapes with winter themes and gloomy days when previous paintings emphasized clarity and sun. In Britain, artists turned out pictures of ice skaters and curlers, but some of the most famous of these depicted the frost fairs held in London, which started whenever it got cold enough for the Thames to freeze. These were unofficial holidays, when carnival tents and vendors would set up on the ice and ply their wares to merry, if shivering, Londoners. Because as things got colder and the weather got more erratic, people did, well, what they always do. They adapted. Humans are resilient creatures after all, and they made innovations to agriculture, architecture, and society in order to get them through. And that's what we're going to talk about next week as we cap off this series. But right now in our story, something troubling is happening. Not in Europe, but on an island in Indonesia. Mount Tambora, Dutch East Indies, April 10th, 1850. The explosion is so big that people 16,000 miles away in Sumatra think it's gunfire. Above the village of Tambora, the mountain bursts in a flood of burning magma. 10,000 die, caught in the largest human-witnessed eruption in history. Pyroclastic flows race down the mountain, covering the villages in burning ash before the whole of the peninsula starts to collapse, shelving into the ocean. Lava flows wipe out nearly all vegetation and slop into the sea, with the mixture of pumice and tree trunks hardening into floating stone rafts up to 3 miles wide. 10 billion tons of rock. The top 5,000 feet of the mountain's elevation are ejected 141,000 feet straight into the stratosphere. Then the ash rains down, smothering and burning crops across Indonesia. But the fine particles, the winds catch those, spreading them around the globe, blocking sunlight. By June, Londoners were observing that the sunset was different. Beautiful pinks and purples above, with the horizon a deep red. They had no idea that they were about to experience the worst year of the Little Ice Age. The year without a summer. Even saying those words makes me feel a little bit freezing inside. It's a good thing I brewed up some warm and tasty coffee from Trade to cut through that cold. We love working with Trade because the EC crew drinks a lot of coffee. They're this awesome subscription service that delivers fresh, curated for you coffee from local roasters right to your door when and how you want it. And they use their expertise to map your specific taste against hundreds of different coffee flavor profiles, which is to say they help you find the perfect roast and grind just every single time. Case in point, Trade just matched me with a great blend from a local NYC roaster with a historically named reference on the front and everything. And not only did they grind it perfectly for my French press, but it showed up at my door fast. And I know that Jeff has been having a great time trying out all of Trade's dark espresso beans because he totally doesn't have a problem. So if you'd like to join us in upgrading your morning routine with just way better beans, right now Trade is offering 1 free bag of coffee with any subscription if you use our link drinktrade.com/extra credits. This is not a drill, people. Free coffee. You can sign up for Trade right here. You're gonna love it. And once you're fully caffeinated, check out another of our videos here. The biggest bean thanks to Ahmed Ziad Turk, Angelo Valenciana, Arcalite Games, Dominic Valenciana, Izzy Coin, Joseph Blame, Kuya Koi, and Michael Hoggett for being our legendary patrons.